Hello, here we are cooking with Grandma. I get a lot of questions about cooking dried beans. I don't know why this seems so hard to people. This is basically boiling water. It is one of the most simplest things to do that there could possibly be. So let me kind of walk you through the process. First of all, you have to have some dried beans. And there's lots of different kinds, and probably two of the most common would be pinto beans, which are the brown ones. Sometimes people call them soup beans, but they're pinto beans. And then there are these white beans, which are technically Great Northern, but sometimes people call them white beans. So these are the most common ones. Today, I happen to have just a little bit of both kinds, and so I'm mixing them, which I really like because the pinto beans do not cook up as soft as the Great Northerns do, and so you get some of that brown soupy goodness from the pinto beans, but then you also get some of the mushiness, if that's a word, coming from the Great Northerns. But anyway, that's just a personal preference. So there's lots of different kinds of dried beans. They are very economical. Also, dried beans, any kind of beans, these kind of beans, are very high in protein as well. And so if you're trying to up your protein count, dried beans are a great way to do that, low in calorie. There's my timer. So hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that. Alexa was reminding me that it should be time for my Instant Pot to be shutting off. And sure enough, there is 1 minute left. So let me tell you what we're doing here with the dried beans. Okay, so the Instant Pot has finished 4 minutes of pressure. And so that alarm will go off. There we go. Okay, so let me tell you what I've done up to this point. So I took the dried beans that I had, and I didn't think of it last night to soak them overnight. And so here it is. It's a little after 3 in the afternoon. I want to have these for supper. So we had to do a soak. So, because these are super hard, and normally it would take hours for them to cook on the stove, traditional method. Now, first thing you want to do with dried beans is you want to look them or sort them. You want to go through them. Occasionally, you'll find a stone in the dried beans. I mean, this is a natural product, and so you could find a clump of dirt, a rock. It's not normal, but occasionally you do. And so you do have to look the beans to make sure that there's no debris in there. So what I do is I take a very simple, just a strainer, anything that you have that has holes in it, and I just pour a small amount of beans in there, and I look them to make sure there are no stones in there. I'm a little picky, so I'll also take out the broken ones, or if there's one that doesn't look like it's quite shaped exactly right, I will take it out as well. So I make sure that I have all good, perfect beans left. Okay, so then I will rinse them. And so normally, like if I'm doing it in my Instant Pot, I'll take the pot, look my beans, pour the beans into the pot, run some warm water in there, swish them around, rinse them through the strainer, run more water in the pot, put them in there, rinse them again. So I'll rinse them 3 or 4 times to make sure that I've got any dirt off of them. Okay, so that's done. So the beans are now have been looked and they're clean. And there's no debris. So that's the first step. Okay, so then the next step that we want to do is we want to soak the beans. Now, you have several options here depending on how much time you have. So if you think of this the day before, that would be awesome. And you can just put your beans, your dried beans, in a pot of water, a big bowl of water, whatever. Sit it out overnight and let the beans soak. So they go from a dry state to being reconstituted like they were first shelled out of their pods. So that's what soaking does for them. It brings them back to the way they were in their fresh state. Okay, so you're going to look them, clean them before you soak them, whichever way you decide to do it. So you can do it overnight if you have plenty of time. If you don't have plenty of time, then you have a couple of other options. On the package of most all dried beans, regardless of what brand you purchase, it will tell you a quick soak method. And this works very nicely. If you have, say, you get up in the morning and you decide you want to have beans for that night, you can do a quick soak. And what that amounts to is you look and clean your beans the way I just showed you. You put them in a pot and put lots of water, like maybe 4 cups of water for every cup of beans that you're going to be using, dried beans you're going to be using. And then put them on the stove on a pretty high heat. Get them to a rolling boil, so where there's bubbles bursting on the top of the water. Let the beans boil, and I think it's for like 3 to 5 minutes. Quick soak, yes. Bring to a boil 2 or more minutes. So, okay, 3 to 5, that's about right. Okay, so let them boil 3 to 5 minutes, something like that, whatever you got while you're running around. Then just turn the eye off. Put a lid on it and let the beans just sit there in that hot boiling, or what was boiling water. Let them sit there for an hour. And that will soak your beans as well. And that way, at the end of the hour, the beans will be back to their fresh state. Okay, now, neither of those 2 things worked for me today because it's already after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I did today is I'm using my Instant Pot, which I love my Instant Pot. It's really great. I use it for lots of different things. So maybe I'll do some cooking with grandmas on some other things as well. But so this is the Instant Pot. So what I did, I looked at my beans, I rinsed them well, made sure they were nice and clean, and then I put them in the stainless steel pot that's on the inside of the Instant Pot. And according to the instructions, it says that you pressure them for 4 minutes, and then you let it cool for 10 minutes for the pressure to reduce before you take them out. So that's what I have done. That's what the timer was telling me, that it was about time for the pressure to be off. So I pressure cooked them for 4 minutes. I have approximately 2 cups of beans in there. Again, I had just the bottom of the bag, and so I just put them in. And I put 8 or 9 cups of water in there. So you want to make sure there's plenty of water in there because beans will soak up the liquid and expand. So you don't want beans boiling out of your pot. So I'm at 6 minutes, and so the pot is cooling off. The pressure is going down. By the way, this is a very safe way to pressure cook. I mean, it's just sitting here, but the pressure is reducing. There is a little button back here that lets you know when the pressure has completely gone down, or you can manually reduce the pressure by letting the steam out. We're not going to do that. We're going to let it reduce naturally, and we're going to let it sit there for 10 minutes until the pressure's gone down. Then at that point, I'm going to go in and I'm going to pour the water off. Now, this is a very important step, and sometimes people forget to do this or don't know to do this, particularly if they're making dried beans in their crock pot. Sometimes people will throw, they'll wash their beans and they're clean and they've looked them, but then they just throw them in the crock pot, put the water in there, turn it on, leave it on all night. There you go. You have beans. Yes, that works. However, beans have a reputation of having a lot of gas in them. And one of the ways that you can reduce the gas and the unpleasantness of beans is to pour off your soak water. So, very important. So, if you soak your beans, whatever way you do it, whether you sit it on the counter overnight, whether you're putting them in the crock pot overnight to soak them, which is probably a little too long if the heat's on, or if you're doing the quick soak on the stove, or if you're doing a pressure soak like I just did, you always want to pour that water off. And you'll notice that the water, especially if you're doing pintos because they're brown, the water is a little foamy and it's a little brown in color. So we want to dispose of that water, and that will eliminate some of the unpleasantness that comes along with the beans. And so you get the goodness, all the protein, the healthy aspects of the beans, and reduce some of the unpleasantness. So we're almost at the 10 minutes, which is great. I also wanted to tell you, I'm going to be adding some ham, some leftover ham. So what I did, we had a ham at Christmas, and if you're like most families, you're so excited to have ham, and you eat all the great, wonderful center section slices, but then you've got all this that's around the bone, or it's at the ends or whatever, but it's still good. It's ham, but it's just not those beautiful slices that we like to serve on a pretty plate. So what I did this year, and I don't always do, but it's worked out so well this year. So what I did is I took the time to cut off as much of that ham as I could around the bone. And I had a few little slices that were left that'll be good for Grandpa and me to eat. But I had a lot of chunks. And so chunks are wonderful in dried beans. And so I'll grab it. Excuse me. I have a little foil package, and it says ham chunks. And so these have been in the freezer since Christmas. And so I'm letting them thaw out. They're already getting a little squishy. So that's good. So they're going to be ready to put in my beans when my beans have come out from under the pressure. So we're already at 11 minutes. So, but the steam has not, or the little button has not gone down, that the pressure has totally released. So I'm going to let it go a little bit longer, and I may have to vent it to get the pressure completely off. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause right here, and I'm going to do that step, and then I'll come back and show you getting ready to cook the beans. Okay? I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. I did have to manually vent the pressure off of the Instant Pot, and it took about 7 minutes for all the steam to escape and the little button to go down, so it was safe to open the lid. So now I have poured off the soak water, used a strainer, just poured the hot water through there so I could capture any beans, and then I added fresh water to the pot, and I put about 8 cups of fresh water in with the beans. So now we're ready to actually pressure cook them so that they're going to be ready in time for dinner tonight. So what we're going to do, first of all, your dried beans do need a little fat in them. So the ham that I have is rather lean, because remember it was a a fancy ham. So it's lean, so there's not a lot of fat in it. So I'm going to add some fat. Now, if you're not adding any kind of meat at all, you definitely need a little fat. Now, you can cook them without fat. So if you're trying to do a fat-free diet, you definitely can do them without any fat at all. Just skip adding oil to it. But I think it makes them a little tastier, and it makes them a little softer too, I think. So I'm going to add a little bit of oil. Like I said, I've got about 2 cups of beans in here. So I'm going to add approximately 2 tablespoons of oil. So not a lot. This is canola, but you could use any kind of vegetable oil in it. Give that a little stir. Now I'm going to add some salt. I like to use sea salt, but simply because I've heard it's a little better for you, but don't know necessarily that that's true. For this amount of beans, perhaps about a teaspoon of salt. You can always add more salt at the end of the cooking process, so that you could taste it first, and if there's not enough salt, you could always add that at the end. I'm also going to add a little black pepper because my husband loves pepper, so we're going to add a little black pepper to it. And then of course my ham that I have already explained to you about, and we're going to stir that up a little bit. And now the ham is kind of semi-defrosted. We're going to add that in there. Now, let me give you a little bit of advice about adding ingredients. One thing that you do not want to add at this point when you're cooking beans is anything that's acidic, particularly tomatoes, but also things like lemon juice, things like that, because it will keep your beans from cooking. I know it sounds crazy, doesn't it? But if you were to add a can of tomatoes at this point, it'd wreck the cooking of your beans. So if you're wanting to add tomatoes, you're going to make some kind of dish here with the dried beans. Maybe you wanted to make some kind of bean soup or something, and you wanted to add some tomatoes. Go ahead and cook the beans, and at the end of the cooking process, then you could add your tomatoes and cook them a little more and get them mixed in, okay? But at this point, we've just got the pre-soaked beans, fresh water, salt, pepper, a little bit of vegetable oil, and I added my yummy ham in there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put the lid on, and it makes that fun little sound when it's locked. And then I'm going to push the bean setting, and it goes to 35 minutes. And so that is the amount of pressure cooking time. I'm going to make sure that my valve here is on, what do they call it? It's closed, not venting. So I want to make sure that I have that where I vented it before. I want to make sure that I closed it. So that's closed. It automatically comes on, as you see. I've got it on beans, and it's on. And so now it's going to pressure cook my beans for 35 minutes. And that's good because that's going to put it a little bit after 4. And so that'll be great, because then at that point I can check them, see what the tenderness is. Now, probably they will not be quite as tender as I'm going to want them to be. So the great thing about the Instant Pot is it has this saute setting, And so what I will probably do at the end of the process, after the 35 minutes of pressure cooking has happened, and then I let it cool off enough that I can vent the pressure off and I can open the lid, I'm probably going to turn the saute on and let them come to a really nice boil in the Instant Pot. And at that point, I'm going to stir it quite a bit, because all of us like, with dried beans, we like that thick, juicy sauce or soup in the beans. And so that's why you want to, number one, make sure there's enough water in there. But then two, while you may want to give it some extra cooking at the end so that you can get that nice friction going with the boil, so that the beans are bouncing around and kind of breaking each other down. Another thing you can do if you want more soup in your beans is you could take a fork or the side of a spoon or something, and you can go in there and actually crush some of the beans and stir them in, kind of speeding up the friction process, and get you some nice soup going on with the beans. So there you go. That's how you make dried beans using the Instant Pot when it's late in the afternoon. Now, this is going to be so great because my husband will come in from work. I work from home, so, I'm here. But when he gets home from work, the beans will be ready. He makes the best yellow cornmeal muffins. They're just to die for. And so he will come in and I will sweetly, like I always do, I'll sweetly ask him, will you please make some of your wonderful cornbread muffins? And of course he will. And so we will have a wonderful dinner of just dried beans with some ham and those wonderful cornbread muffins. And that'll make a great afternoon meal. So until next time, Cooking with Grandma.